Welcome to The Growth Spurt, a weekly AI podcast by the Second Baptist Church of Ann Arbor. Today we're diving deep into a sermon that really resonated with me. Your Butt is Blocking Your Better by Dr. Stephen J. Daniels, Sr.
It's a part of the church's series, Better in 2025.
Oh, okay, yeah. I hadn't put that together. Better in 2025, yeah.
Yeah, and it uses the story from Numbers, the 12 scouts sent to explore Canaan. And it kind of illustrates how we often sabotage our own progress with that.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, I've heard that story so many times, but I never really thought about how much power that little word but can have.
Right.
Like the scouts, they come back with this amazing news. The land is flowing with milk and honey.
Literally a land of abundance, right?
Yeah. But then they hit us with the but. But T, they say, the people are strong, the cities are fortified, and suddenly all that good news just, poof, disappears.
Yeah.
It's just overshadowed.
It's like they negated the whole first part. The positive is just gone.
Totally.
Oh.
And they even brought back, remember,
Yeah.
that massive cluster of grapes.
Oh, yeah. I'd forgotten about that.
It was so big they needed 2 men to carry it.
Yeah.
And you're telling me they saw all that abundance, that tangible evidence of God's blessing, and still managed to focus on the giants in the land.
Well, and that's what Dr. Daniels is asking, right? He wants us to think about what butts we're holding on to in our own lives. What's blocking our own blessings?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I like that. What are our butts? That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, he actually calls it the fuel for a big butt. Those what-if questions that paralyze us.
What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? Yeah, exactly.
Right, and he goes on to say the real obstacle isn't actually the giants, those external circumstances.
It's the grasshopper mentality
Exactly.
the scouts had about themselves. It's like they saw themselves as so insignificant. Like, can you imagine feeling like a grasshopper next to someone you've never even met?
Yeah. And, I think we've all felt that way at some point, that, inadequacy, that feeling of not measuring up.
Oh, absolutely. We all have those moments. So it's not just about what's happening around us. It's how we see ourselves within those circumstances.
And that can be even more challenging to overcome, right? Because it's internal.
It really is. So, okay. So we need to ditch the grasshopper mentality, develop a better view of ourselves. Got it. But how do we do that? Where do we even begin?
Well, Dr. Daniels highlights this idea that obstacles, no matter how big, they're always temporary.
Yeah, right. God's promises are enduring.
But, it's one thing to know that and another thing to believe it, really believe it in your heart.
Totally. There's a huge difference there.
And I think he's using the story of the scouts as kind of a warning, a cautionary tale.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Because they were denied entry to the promised land, right? All because of their lack of faith. So it's like, are we missing out on our own blessings because of our doubts?
Oh, wow. That's pretty powerful when you think about it like that.
Yeah.
So how do we escape that cycle? How do we start making choices based on faith and not fear?
Well, Dr. Daniels calls it doing some better work internally.
Okay, so what does that mean?
It's about, taking a real honest look at ourselves, at our habits, our mindset. What are we feeding our spirit?
He's talking about fasting, prayer,
Yeah.
deeper study of Scripture, right? Like really creating space for God to work in our lives.
Exactly. And he emphasizes, even in the land of milk and honey, there will still be challenges. He calls it the sting. Those are just inevitable obstacles, even when things are good.
So it's not about trying to avoid the sting. It's about having the resilience and faith to go through it.
Right. And that's where I think that conqueror idea comes in. We have the power to overcome those challenges through our faith, through God.
Which brings us back to that image of the scouts. I mean, it's crazy how they projected all their insecurities onto the giants without even talking to them, just assuming the worst.
Right. And it goes to show that sometimes we're the ones creating the butts in our own lives.
Whoa. So the first step to better is recognizing that we might be the ones holding ourselves back.
Absolutely. And once we do that, we can start to dismantle those limiting beliefs, trade them in for a more empowering perspective.
And that's where faith comes in, I guess.
Yeah.
It's about choosing to believe in God's promises, even when our fears are screaming otherwise. But what does that actually look like? How do you build that kind of unshakable faith?
It's a good question. And Dr. Daniels actually says, faith isn't just something you wake up with, It's a choice. It's an active choice we make every single day.
Okay, so it's more like a muscle, right? Something you have to exercise.
Exactly. You have to strengthen it. And that brings us to what I think is maybe the hardest part of Dr. Daniels' message.
Okay, which is?
Embracing God's will, even when, it's pushing you out of your comfort zone.
Ooh, yeah. He talks about that That powerful image of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yeah, praying for that cup to pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, even Jesus, in his human form, he felt the weight of what was coming. But ultimately, he surrendered to God's plan. Not my will, he said, but thine be done.
And it's like, wow, even Jesus had those moments of doubt. But in the end, he chose to trust.
It's a big reminder that even when things are tough, there's strength in surrender, trusting that God's plan is ultimately for our good, even when we don't get it.
And I think that message is so powerful, especially right now with, a new year starting and so much uncertainty in the world.
It's easy to get caught up in our own plans, our own desires, but we have to try and align ourselves with, what God has in mind for us.
And that's where we find the real freedom.
Yeah.
When we surrender to his will.
Yeah, like we finally get out of our own way and let God work through us. And Dr. Daniels really drives this point home when he says, God isn't limited by our doubts and our fears.
Right.
He's a God of abundance, a God who wants to bless us beyond measure.
I love that. And, it's funny because earlier we were talking about all those buts and how they block our blessings. But what if it's not about getting rid of them altogether?
Okay, I like where you're going with this.
What if it's about changing them? Like instead of those buts being these expressions of fear and doubt, maybe they can become statements of faith and surrender.
So instead of saying yes, but.
It becomes, yes, Lord, I trust you.
Exactly.
Wow. That really brings us back to those grapes the scouts brought back. That abundance. It's all there waiting for us. We just got to believe.
So remember those blessings, they're not just material things, right?
Right. It's the whole picture. Our relationships, our health, our spiritual growth, all of it.
Yeah, it's about feeling whole, peaceful, knowing you have a purpose.
And I think that's the heart of Dr. Daniels' message in Your Butt is Blocking Your Better.
Yeah.
It's a call to action. Like step into who you are meant to be. You're not defined by your past, or even what's happening right now.
Yeah, he wants us to remember we're children of God.
Right. And he sees our potential. He believes in us, even when we don't believe in ourselves. So it's time to ditch that grasshopper mentality. Embrace the better.
So what about you? What butt are you holding on to? What do you need to let go of to move forward?
It's a good question. Something to think about as we go into this next week.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. But think about it, those grapes, that overflowing abundance. That's what's waiting for us when we finally let go of the butts.
I know. It makes you think, right? What areas of my life, what am I holding back? Is it a dream, something I've been putting off because I'm scared? Or maybe a relationship. Like I haven't been fully, all in because I'm afraid to get hurt.
We all have them, don't we? Those butts, those nagging little doubts whispering in our ears.
No, for sure.
And Dr. Daniels, he makes this fascinating point, He says, those voices, they might not even be ours.
Whoa, okay, explain that.
It's like maybe those doubts, they're echoes from past hurts or, what society expects of us or even other people's doubts, projected onto us.
It's like we're carrying around all these burdens, these butts that we didn't even choose in the first place.
Exactly. And that's why recognizing them is so important. Because once we see them, then we can start to really examine them.
Challenge them, right. Yeah.
And let them go.
It reminds me of that line in the sermon. I wrote it down. The problem is not the problem. I love that. The problem is your perception of the problem.
So powerful.
It really is.
He wants us to shift our perspective, right? To see those butts, not as the end of the road, but as opportunities to learn and grow.
Okay, I love
Think about those scouts again, facing those fortified cities.
Okay, yeah.
What if instead of seeing these impossible barriers, they saw, a challenge, we're going to figure this out. We'll find a way.
So instead of saying the cities are too strong, but we can't get in, they say the cities are strong and we will find a way.
Exactly.
Wow. It really does change the whole story.
Right. It shifts everything from I can't to how can I.
I love that. Embracing the and.
It opens up possibilities we might never have seen before.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Your Butt is Blocking Your Better, I think the big takeaway, at least for me, is this. We always have a choice. We can let our butts run the show, keep us playing small. Or we can give them to God, embrace the and finally step into who we were meant to be.
Yeah, I like that. It's a journey for sure, not a destination.
Totally.
But it starts with recognizing those butts, pushing back against them and replacing them with, faith, trust, believing in ourselves and what God created us to do.
So this week, let's all try to pay attention to those buts that pop up. Where are we holding ourselves back? Where are we letting fear, make our decisions for us? And most importantly, how can we flip those buts into ands?
How can we open ourselves up to all the amazing things God has in store for us?
It's definitely something to think about. Go in peace, be blessed, and may the joy of Jesus be yours. I'll see you next week.